That was tough, dude. That was tough. Let's
That was so good.
That was tough.
You actually have to be on cocaine to be on this podcast.
That was tough.
Cocaine. Cocaine Billy. Cocaine. Cocaine Billy.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to yet another edition of Cocaine Willie, the official K-State representative on the College Huddle. I am your commissioner, Bob Trollsby, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Good Chef Andre Napier and Fireball Matt Marchesini. Tonight, we are doing a special crossover edition of Cocaine Willie, where we are also featuring Larry Crane, the host of the Night Watch podcast, the official Rutgers representative on the College Huddle. And we're going into this bowl game matchup. This is the fifth bowl game of the last 6 years under the Chris Kleiman era. This would be, if Kleiman can pull off the win, his third bowl win in the Rate Bowl against Rutgers. And Rutgers will be making their 13th bowl appearance all time, being led by a very familiar face to K-State fans who go back to the 2006 Texas Bowl, a game I do not remember fondly, certainly, although Josh Freeman was a dude. And Larry, I just have to ask you, you don't have Ray Rice in the backfield anymore, do you?
We don't have Ray. We have the second guy, or the first guy since Ray to run for back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and second all-time rushing leader behind him, Kyle Monungai. We don't know if he's going to play yet, but we don't have Ray. Ray is no longer with the team, obviously.
We will get into Kyle and his status and maybe any updates with that. But before we dive into the episode, we first want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Annie Mae's Parlor. Annie Mae's they've been in business for 50 years. They're located at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville in Manhattan, Kansas. It is a must-visit destination in Aggieville on game days and school nights alike, and they feature a wide variety of craft cocktails, draft beers, and everything in between, along with entertainment like live music, comedy, and all sorts of other events. They have Trivia Smackdown every week. That's going to be tomorrow night on Wednesday, December 18th. And they've got Mighty Fine Jam Night that's happening Thursday, December 19th, as you're listening to this later this week. And then finally, Friday, December 20th, they've got Pride in the Parlor, and they present Make the Yuletide Slay. So the Yuletide will be slaying, and use your own context clues on what kind of sleigh we're talking about there.
I have, and I'm very excited about that.
That is that.
Bro.
Annie Mae's is at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville. Be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you. I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Matt. Let's talk big picture here.
Yo, it's been a while hearing my voice on this. I'm glad to be back with you all to talk about Rutgers. So just want to talk big picture from this season. So Greg Schiano in his 15th season at Rutgers, they've started off the season strong with a 4-0 record here, but they dropped the next 4 games after that. But then end of the year, winning 3 of their last 4, finishing 7-5 overall, 4-5 in Big Ten play. So just give us a little bit more insight on kind of the roller coaster ride that appeared to be Rutgers football this season. Wins against like some Big Ten teams like Washington, Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota. You dropped a few on the West Coast, or a couple on the West Coast, plus Nebraska and Wisconsin. But yeah, talk to us about kind of how this season has gone so far.
So we kind of started the season with high expectations. It was a combination of, you got guys returning who were contributors last year, upperclassmen who, not just contributors for Rutgers, but actually really, made impact plays in the Big Ten. And combined with a schedule that seemed honestly kind of advantageous for Rutgers. You didn't have Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, who maybe we would have liked Michigan on the schedule. Ohio State didn't, but maybe we would have. I don't know. You didn't have those guys in the schedule. And when you look at the travel, situation and the bye weeks, it lined up pretty good for Rutgers. So I thought that the floor was 5-7 and the ceiling at a stretch was 10-2. And I thought my prediction was actually 9-3. And when you look at the season in hindsight, it was within reach. I think one of the biggest things that happened with Rutgers, we had injuries, but I don't like the injury excuse. Obviously, Mo Toure, one of the best probably the best linebacker, maybe the best defender on the team, goes down preseason. You don't have him. Other injuries piled up on the offensive line and elsewhere. I think we started the season thinking we were going to rely almost exclusively on our running back, Kyle Monangai, who led the Big Ten in rushing last year. And we kind of played in his shell, this very conservative, we're not going to lose, we're not going to, beat ourselves type mentality. And I think after the 4-game losing streak, after stripping, Shiano said he stripped it down to the studs with Joe Harasimiak, defensive coordinator, who, by the way, took a job elsewhere. I think UMass, he's not going to be there to coach the bowl game. What they did was they got creative. They let their young guys play. They opened up the offense with Ethan Kaliak-Manis at quarterback. They kind of divvied it up. We weren't even returning punts or fielding punts early in the year because it was too risky. We started letting the guy actually field punts. And I think things really started to pick up. We had some decent players there. The schedule wound up working in our favor later in the year. Lost a heartbreaker to Illinois on some questionable coaching decisions, in my opinion. But overall, solid job. You get to 7-5, respectable, good bowl matchup. And we think the season was salvaged. I still think it could have been more, but we'll take 7-5, and it's still one of the better seasons we've had since joining the Big Ten. And kind of roller coaster ride, but I think most fans are happy with where we are at the end, with the caveat that maybe it could have been better.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things that lead to building blocks for the program, especially under Greg. But I want to talk to you about what could also lead for the future before we start getting into these bowl matchups.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk that transfer portal and maybe a little bit of NFL exit too, because you touched on Kyle Monangai possibly leaving for the NFL. What's the status with him, and possibly what's going on with the squad? Did you get hit by the transfer portal hard?
So not yet. And I want to ask you guys about your transfer portal when we get to that. But Kyle's going to the NFL because he's maxed out now. He's at least going to enter the draft no matter what. We're still waiting to see if he's going to play in the bowl game. That's up in the air. A lot of other really good players for us are going to the NFL because they're maxed out. There were so many returning guys. Robert Longerbeam, the cornerback. Aaron Lewis on the defensive end. We did lose Wesley Bailey, the other defensive end, to the transfer portal. He went to Louisville. He already committed. He was an impact player when he was healthy at defensive end. He probably was our best pass rusher outside of Motoré, who was hurt preseason. This year, he only played 4 games, and there was a conscious decision. He wasn't 100%. He was going to redshirt. There was hope for Rutgers fans that he would return to us, but he entered his name and he's gone. Other than that, it's really mostly been guys who you would expect to enter the portal, guys who might have been, not where they wanted on the 2 deep and things like that. We have a couple guys who got hurt who were returning. Brian Felter on the offensive line. Motoré, as of right now, is coming back. So there could still be some surprises there. We went out and got some guys in the portal, a run stuffing D tackle, name escapes me, a running back, kind of depth pieces. But 2 years in a row now, Rutgers has not been hit that hard yet, knock on wood, in the transfer portal. And I think there is an emphasis in the program in allotting the NIL fund to retaining players and still hitting the high school recruiting pretty hard. Whether that sustains and how that goes, especially with revenue sharing, remains to be seen. But 2 years in a row, knock on wood, they've really made an effort to retain their guys, and it looks like hopefully they will again.
That's a good spot to be in, and it definitely stood out to me when I was looking at On3's database earlier today, just to double check and see, okay, how's Rutgers looking? Are they having a mass exodus, or are they pretty much retaining guys? And it looks like most of those guys are being retained, with the exception of the couple of guys that you mentioned. I want to talk a high level about the offense. Rutgers currently right now 43rd in offensive efficiency when you look at EPA per play. They're 38th in the rush and 47th when teams are dropping back or when they are dropping back to pass. It's a 55-45 run pass split. Currently 25th in the nation in total rushes per game. So they are kind of ground and pound, tending to hand it off to the hot hand, who is Kyle Monangai, more often than not, but not really cracking the top 25 in a bunch of other offensive stats or metrics here and there. So they're not really giving the ball away. They do tend to protect the ball, it seems like.
Yes.
so not giving the ball away all that much, and currently also one of the most disciplined teams in the country, 6th in fewest penalty yards per game and 11th in penalties per game. So I guess tell us a little bit more about the offense, maybe just at a high level, and then maybe talk a little bit more about the scheme. What kind of a scheme is Schiano running these days? Is it more similar to what you were running back in 06, the last time we faced you, or has he evolved over the last 18 years?
When he first got there, we made an effort to go to an honest, like a spread. And we had Sean Gleason come in, and we were running hurry up offense, exclusively shotgun snaps and spread out 4 wide, 1 back, and keeping it like that. When Gleason was jettisoned a couple of years ago, it seemed that what Greg realized is that we had some really talented running backs on the roster. And I think the hesitancy, we were a pro style offense back in those days. And even through the Kyle Flood years when we first entered the Big Ten, traditional pro style offense, wanted to run the ball, big wide outs on the outside, traditional blocking, pass catching tight end, still ran with a fullback. Michael Burton, who most recently maybe played for Chicago or the Lions, was our fullback. The hesitancy with going back to that pro style type offense has been the offensive line and our inability for the first few years in the Big Ten to really keep pace with the powerhouses in the trenches in conference. That's kind of changed back in a way where over the last few years, we're not running a pro style. I mean, we don't have a fullback. We're almost always in shotgun. You had 3 wide most of the time with a tight end. And we recently, when we needed to, because we are down to our 4th tight end, we started going 4 wide. And there's RPO in there where Ethan Kaliakmanis, is going to make a read. He's either going to tuck it or he's going to run it. Last year with Gavin Wimsett, who had a much more prolific legs, but not near the accuracy of Kaliakmanis or the passing proficiency under pressure, you saw a lot more RPO with the quarterback, running. This year, towards the end of the season, what you really saw was these tall wideouts on the outside, particularly KJ Duff and Ian Strong. Strong a sophomore, Duff a freshman, both from Long Island, were actually high school teammates. These guys were going out, going up for the ball, attacking the ball, and Ethan was opening up much more there. And what you saw was the run game complementing the pass game quite a bit more. So you're going to see the options. Either Ethan's going to keep it more often than not. He's going to stick it in the gut of Monungai and say run. You're not going to see a fullback in there. You're going to see the tall wideouts going out to make players. I would watch Dymere Miller, who was a transfer. He led, I believe, the MAC in yardage and receptions last year. We got him on the transfer portal this year. He's been very good. When they opened up the offense, he was even better. He's the slot guy. He's a 5th-year senior, but he's already said he is playing in the bowl game. So I'd watch out for that. I think the offensive stats and proficiencies may be dragged down on the season total a bit by some of those lulls we had, especially earlier in the season, particularly when we weren't opening up the offense at all. And so those numbers might have caught up later to some extent, but I think that's where you're seeing the lull. I think you're going to get downfield passes with Kaliakmanis. And really the last 4 games, a lot of mid-range, passes, a lot of that midfield, 10, 20-yard type completions, which we were not seeing early in the year when we were using the tight end a lot more, going out into the flat and things like that, which we've kind of gotten away from and gotten more downfield. So that might be where some of those numbers are coming from. Obviously, an emphasis on protecting the ball. That's just Schiano ball all around. And Ethan's been pretty good. Some errant interceptions, but overall pretty good with not throwing any errant throws into traffic. So we've been good in that regard.
Yeah, you dabbled in the area that I wanted to talk about next, and that's the O-line. The O-line, with you saying that you're going out to this, this more spread look, for only allowing 17 sacks, what is that percentage-wise? Bob put it in the notes for me. That's 25th in the nation in terms of sack percentage. That's pretty good. Talk to me about this O-line. Give me some pros and cons and some names to watch for that are probably going to be opening holes for somebody like Kyle Monungai if he plays.
So Zelinskis, he's our center. He was a revelation last year, a little bit of an unsung hero. I think he does a lot of the dirty work there in the interior of that offensive line. And he, kind of opens things up and the momentum starts with him. The left tackle, Holland Pierce, he's an NFL caliber player. He's another fifth-year senior. He'll be going to the league. He was stellar this year for us. I mean, very few, if I forget how many sacks he allowed or pressures, but honestly, very, very good stats for him. He's a rock on the left side of that offensive line. You've had some shuffling. Dante Chin was somebody who we plugged in at guard. Brian Felter, who was an absolute mauler in the run game, respectable in pass protection. He went down earlier on in the season, and you had some growing pains in there as you're plugging guys in there. And I think part of the reason we struggled a little bit was you were plugging guys in there. Needham went down. He was our right tackle. He'll be back next year. He came back and actually played a little tight end for us in the last game of the season, just blocking wise. So watch for Needham. Like, where is he? Is he at tackle? Is he taking it easy and just coming in for tight end here and there? Dante Chin, you want to watch out for. Came on. These guys were guys who had the frame and the body and the potential, I think, the staff thought, to be Big Ten linemen, but there were some growing pains with those injuries along the line. And as you had to shuffle them, Taj White, guys who thought he'd be a tackle, wound up playing on the interior because Chin was struggling a little bit in Felter's absence. He got kicked out to his more natural position once Needham went down, and I think the guys started to settle in. The offensive line, I will say, for 2 years now, and that didn't apply against Wisconsin for some unknown miraculous reason, but they can hold their own in the Big Ten suddenly, and I think it just speaks to the development, but also, we've made a concerted effort to go out in every class in the portal, go out and get guys who can play in the Big Ten, who can hold their own. And I think you're going to be seeing an offensive line who's found its groove, found its rhythm in the last month of the season, and is coming out looking to. They've done pretty good in pass protection. You'll get pressures here and there, but also good in the run game. And generally speaking, have had respectable showings. There'll be a fissure here and there. Like, there'll be times where if you've got a good linebacker who can hit a hole well, or a really disruptive defensive lineman, they'll get in the backfield and it's up to Kyle to try to make a move. And there'll be times when Ethan gets some pressure on him, but by and large, respectable, and hasn't been any game where they're just under siege. The line has done its job.
Well, you've brought up Ethan Kaliak-Manis, your starting quarterback, a good amount of here early on, and just want to kind of talk about him a little bit. So 2023, he was a junior, played at Minnesota, transferred to Rutgers here for his senior season in 2024. Has had definitely a solid season. He's just shy of 2,500 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's been sacked a decent number of times this season, about a 55% completion percentage, just throwing some stats out there. But, I mean, how excited was the fan base getting him from, fellow Big Ten school, and how has he developed in his senior season to get this team to 7-5?
There was certainly a bit of a debate at the end of last year because Gavin Wimsatt had come in with so much fanfare, came in early, got an NIL deal, had all the physical attributes you'd think you want for a dual threat quarterback. And he got us to a bowl game last year, although the passing efficiency was grossly under what you would have wanted it to be. So Ethan comes in, he's Kirk Shiraka's guy. Kirk Shiraka obviously was the OC at Minnesota before coming back to Rutgers, and Ethan was out at Minnesota. We get the transfer in, and there was some, his stats were respectable coming in, but not necessarily stellar. He had a decent first year under Kirk Shiraka. The second year was a little bit of regression, and there was some, people wondered, could he get his completion percentage up where it needed to be? Could he get away from making those errant throws and causing turnovers, which kind of plagued him in his second year with the Gophers? And getting him in with us as he really started to get into his groove and flourish, and as Kirk Shiraka and I think the coaching staff overall got more comfortable playing to his strengths and kind of opening up the playbook and letting him do his thing, he's shown a lot of moxie, for lack of a better term, just a lot of guts. The Illinois game, which we lost, I mean, 2 carries for him of 10 yards on like 4th down to basically will us down there, then throw it to Kyle Monungai to go in for what would have been the game-winning touchdown, if not for a miraculous touchdown on the other side by Illinois after that. But he's been a revelation, and I think this is a team that has had a huge impact. It has players that can make plays on the perimeter and in the backfield. And what they were missing was a facilitator, a point guard, if you will, who can get them the ball and positions to succeed. And even the little things like basic screens and slants that Gavin Wimsatt was struggling with, Ethan is able to make, regularly, which is not saying a ton, but when you have the playmakers Rutgers has and you're able to utilize them properly and Kirk Sharrock is calling the right plays, a guy like that who can facilitate really is vital and integral to the team. And Ethan's done everything we've wanted him to do. I think there's also a belief within the program that Ethan's taken a step up as a junior now this year, and that him as a senior next year, he's expected to be back. Might be the best we've seen of him yet as a senior, and we are encouraged by that. So Ethan's been a really, really good asset for Rutgers. Big part of the reason I think they are where they are.
So one of the other big assets for Rutgers is Kyle Monungai. He's got 1,200, just shy of 1,300 rushing yards on 256 carries, 14 catches for 75 yards through the air. Not really the kind of guy that they're scheming into the passing game all that much, and is averaging 5 yards per carry on the ground. If Monungai plays, how important is he to a potential Rutgers win? And if he doesn't play, since we're recording this in advance, how are the guys that stack up behind him? How can they fill that void if he decides to opt out of this bowl game? You've got 2 guys that are behind him that are, 200, 300 rushing yards each, Antoine Raymond and Samuel Brown V. So curious your thoughts on those 2 guys, in addition to Monungai, and how critical Monungai is to a win if he does play.
Monungai is critical to a win just because he's Mr. Reliable, right? You can give him the ball, and whether they're under siege, whether a play breaks down, whether he has to fight for numerous extra yards, he's going to do it. And you have that security blanket and that confidence if you're Rutgers that your bell cow back, your main back in that way, he's going to be there for you. There was a game, Minnesota this year, where he couldn't play. He was just banged up too much and he couldn't get in the game. And Antoine Raymond, who's been kind of a really pleasant, young man who came in and really just took the reins when he needed to. And Benjamin, who didn't play until the last 4 games of the year because they consciously wanted to redshirt him. They were actually a pretty good tandem there without Kyle. And they bring certain assets to the table, quickness in the hole. I think Raymond kind of has a similar style to Kyle in there here and there. He's not Kyle yet, obviously, but he can hit holes and he can carry guys a little bit. And Benjamin's in there. He can be shifty and make big plays too. So I think it's a team that's deep at running back. Believe it or not, I don't want to say ridiculously deep, because when Sam Brown was here, who obviously got hurt in the Wisconsin game, was out for the rest of the season, has had a rough career with injuries. He made it really deep because he was the backup, and then you have those 2 guys, and you can keep digging. Whereas without Sam, it's just down to those 2 guys. But they're battle tested. They've had game experience, and so if Kyle were to declare that he's not going to play, which everybody I think would understand for Rutgers at this point, they do have guys to go to. I think they are confident in those guys, and it would just change things up a little bit because you don't have Mr. Reliable there, and you don't have that crutch that you've had, but you do have viable options that can make things happen for you.
Just talking quickly about the wide receivers. So a few names for K-State fans probably to be on the lookout for in this game. Dymere Miller kind of sounds like maybe your number 1 wide receiver, 731 yards on the season, 4 touchdowns. A couple other names are Ian Strong. He has over 500 yards this season and 5 touchdowns. KJ Duff, almost 400 yards and 1 touchdown this season. You have a tight end, Kenny Fletcher, a couple touchdowns on the season as well. So who's Ethan throwing it to? Give us a little bit of insight on those guys.
So Dymere Miller is the slot receiver who, depending on the game plan, can be your number one guy. He led the team in reception yards this year. Quick receiver with sure hand. Well, sure hands earlier in the season, had some drops later in the season. So let me cool out with just riffing a little too much and going off with these crutch commentator. Pretty good hands, really quick, good player, experienced player. He's the type of wide receiver who knows how to find the soft spot in the defense. He knows how to run a route. He knows how to be where he's supposed to be and get open. And for that reason, he really is a big time creator. He'll get, when the route calls for a 10-yard, post or whatever it is, and out, he'll get there. He'll get to the sidelines on an out route. He'll be there. He'll catch the ball. He can get some run yards after the catch in that regard. Our number one, I would say, yes, Dymere Miller sometimes is getting the ball the most. He led the team in reception yards. But Ian Strong is that, alpha perimeter receiver who has, he can go deep. He can catch it contested. He can, you could toss it up to him and he'll go up and grab it. He can catch it over the middle. Ian Strong, he's the one you got to watch for in the red zone. He's a big body receiver, really talented, fights for the ball, comes back for the ball, and he's now in his sophomore year really, I think, emerged as the future at the position of wide receiver for Rutgers. On the other side of him, you have KJ Duff, again, his high school teammate. He's a true freshman. He started off kind of making an impact early at Akron on like a deflected pass. You're like, whoa, that kid kind of came in with fanfare, but he's even taller than Strong. I believe he stands 6'6". Strong is 6'4". I mean, these are big guys. And so he's another big kid. He's got to grow into his body a little bit more, but he's a big-time perimeter wideout who's a playmaker. And then you have Christian Dremel, who led the team last year in receptions. This year was kind of relegated more to punt returning and a backup role because Dymere Miller filled that slot position. But Ian Strong is who I would really be watching out for and keying into. Dymere Miller too. But when you get around that red zone, when you need a crazy play, Ethan's going to chuck it up to Strong, and he's going to rely on that young man. And Strong has been known to come down with the ball. So I would watch for him.
Now let's switch sides. We're going defense now. There's a whole bunch of stats that are floating around here. Top 25 in red zone defense. Love hearing that. 71st nationally in like EPA and all that stuff. But I really want to know about the scheme, because when I think of Big Ten football, I think traditional 4-3. You got to be able to stop the run. But what are you guys running over there, and how is that helping you throughout the season with the defense?
It's an interesting scheme in that we really play with two linebackers and like three safeties. And that third safety becomes like a hybrid linebacker safety where he's going to come up and play the run, but I don't know why. And, that's the scheme we've played. It's worked for us when it's worked. Last year, it worked better. I think the personnel is huge. I think when you're playing with two linebackers that way and the one safety who's going to come down, Flip Dixon, it could be sometimes. Igbinosin was playing there. He struggled. Kaj Sanders, a younger guy from Newark, a freshman, got some run in there. When Mo Toure went out with the season-ending injury, they were kind of rotating Moses Walker, who was an acclaimed recruit when he came in, and Jabome, a young man. I think Jabome might be from Canada. Don't quote me, but anyway, they eventually settled on Jabome. And when you run that scheme, you need linebackers who can cover a lot of ground, cover it fast, play decisive, and know exactly where they need to go. When you had Mo Toure and you had Tyreen Powell, who's another guy who's going to go to the NFL, you had those two guys. There were some growing pains when they went down because Tyreen Powell had an Achilles injury in the offseason. He was injured last year with his knee. And so he did play this year, but early in the year, he was shaky. And without that quickness and decisiveness, the defense was struggling. He found his ground after the bye week, and Jabome started getting the bulk of the reps. We subbed out safety. Flip Dixon is another one to watch out for. Shaquan Loyal has been a mainstay back there. More traditional safety. You know, he's going to play the pass. He's going to blitz, and he's a good blitzer. He's going to come up and find the running back if it's a running play and do his work there. Shiano's always run an interesting kind of hybrid type defense. They had a position called like the R rush back in the day where it was more of like an undersized defensive end who would, you know, they wouldn't always have their hand in the dirt. And it's kind of that old school 3-4 outside linebacker, but it's more of a hybrid because now they're moving up. And we have 4 guys on the defensive line, but then you have those 2 linebackers with the hybridish third safety. What you call that, I couldn't tell you, and I don't want to take Joe Harris-Simiak's, you know, terminology and get it wrong for all those listening out there and then call it out and be like, Larry K, you don't know what you're talking about. But I will tell you that it's that hybrid, you know, kind of 3 safety look, 2 linebacker look with the 2 corners out there traditionally. Obviously, the safety is going to play the wide out if you got 3. And you're going to have guys who, you know, I think that the front line is traditional, and you have, if you were running a 4-3, it's a traditional front 4. You know, you have the 2 defensive ends with their hands in the dirt, playing traditional, pin their ears back on passing downs, learning how to string out and play the run when they need to. And you're going to have those space-eating down linemen. Now, we shuffled it up a little bit. Keontae Hamilton had gotten some run. He was playing inside primarily to start the year. He kicked out a little bit. Young man Walker started getting run as a defensive end, kind of was a wide out to tight end to defensive end development project, who has that kind of long body, like a Jason Taylor type guy who can, you know, work the edge with the arms, get leverage that way. And he actually had a sack safety against Minnesota. So you're going to see that kind of traditional front 4. And then the linebacker play comes down to that athleticism, guys who can cover a lot of ground fast, guys who can cover. And then you're going to have that hybrid safety. He's called a safety, and that's what he is. But he plays sometimes where a linebacker would play, especially a coverage linebacker. So you're going to see that guy get some run. And then, you know, longer beam, obviously. Different guys getting run at cornerback. We've had some injuries. You know, Shady Salam is back there, who started out as a running back. He's gotten some run as corner. He's struggled at times, but kind of gained his footing at times. Eric Rogers, Bo Mascow, I think, is probably the up-and-coming cornerback there. But look for that safety help sometimes, and look for that Rutgers to try to cover the middle of the field with that hybrid safety linebacker and those linebackers, because the corners have struggled here or there. Robert Longerbeam, who is playing, I believe, another NFL, you know, somebody looking towards the NFL, senior out of Maryland, really good player for us, kind of filled in as the number 1 corner when Max Melton went to the NFL, and he's already hitting the ground running there. So interesting defensive scheme, really good last year, kind of had to work through some stuff this year. But when they get going and the linebackers are playing well, they're really formidable. And if that defensive line, and now that it's tweaked, has played better, it's a pretty good defense.
If you're looking at the defense and you're looking at each individual position group, which one would you say is the strongest unit and which one's the weakest?
You know, I would have said without a doubt before the season, you know, linebacker was up there. And now, because of the injuries and whatnot, that's a really good question. And it's a tough question, because I don't know that any one position group this year has completely shined the way that we expected, which is maybe why we had some of the ups and downs. At this juncture, I do like Tyreen Powell and Jabome at linebacker. I think they've settled in. I think Jabome is becoming a force. He's kind of playing that role where he is playing that role that Mo Toure, who was another developmental player who, you know, rose to prominence and shined last year. Now he's stepping into that role. It allows for a lot of freedom and allows for a linebacker to make a lot of plays, and he's been all over the field. So I like linebacker. I think safety with Flip Dixon, Shaquan Loyal, I think it's kind of been a mainstay with really experienced guys who have seen a lot, who know where to be, and can hit really hard and can make plays. They both come down with interceptions also at opportune times. They can both be the full package, you know, with blitzing, with coming up and laying the wood on the run. So I would say at this juncture, I like linebacker and safety. And I think depending on the game and matchup, and it's not necessarily because the defensive line is so great. Rather, sometimes the other position groups aren't playing as well, and the defensive line has played better as of late. But if I had to pick, I would kind of lead towards those two.
Now let's talk to my favorite part of the game, what Kansas State used to be all about, and that's special teams. You talked about it earlier about the, not even fielding punts because you were just so concerned about it. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then kicker and punter. What do we got? What are we looking forward to?
So Jay Patel, the kicker, he's probably one of the better kickers we've had in the last several years. Early on in the season, I thought they put him in some rough spots, going forward on fourth down when it was a makeable field goal, and then having him kick like a 54, 52 yarder, on the road at Vatech. Wasn't great, but he's been pretty consistent down the stretch. Hit some clutch free throws towards the end. And he's reliable. He's nailed 30 plus, 40 plus. He's pretty consistent with extra points. And so he's been good. He doesn't do he doesn't kick off, but he's good and he's accurate kicking the ball. Our punt returner was Christian Dremel. This year, again, he was the leading receiver last year. Wasn't really allowed to field punts early this year, but now he's somebody who's kind of reliable, and he can return a punt here or there. Jacob Anderson, the punter, we've been up and down ever since Adam Korsak, who was really a star punter, left the program. We've had some up and down punting, but I think this year it's been generally solid. And I think the biggest issue with special teams with us, and I wouldn't even say it's all special teams, is kind of will Schiano punt it or will he go for it? He's been really big on these analytics, and we want to second guess him quite a bit. And sometimes we're like, dude, just punt the ball. And other times we're like, why did you punt it? You're at the 43-yard line. You can't kick a field goal. Punt's going into the end zone. Just go for it. But Anderson averaging 42.4 a kick, as long as 61, 46 punts. So he's been respectable. I think kind of a rebound from the last couple years where we struggled a little bit. But that's what you're going to see. You're not going to see – now, we had a field goal blocked against Washington, but it was called back for a penalty. We've blocked the punt against Nebraska. We're unable to capitalize on it, unfortunately, and that's a long story. But I don't want to say you're not going to see the type of crazy special teams play that Schiano is known for in the past, but they haven't been per se as prolific in like the kick blocking game and the trick play game as they have in years past. I think part of that was, the result of being a little conservative early in the season, but also, also just the personnel and things aren't where they were years ago. I think he'd love to improve on that, but you're not going to necessarily see anything. I mean, I hope we block a punt, but I don't think you're going to see anything too crazy from them this year. I haven't seen anything nuts. I think reliable punter and kicker though.
I was going to ask you about that because the opposing field goal percentage for Rutgers right now is first in the nation. So for whatever reason, teams playing Rutgers only convert 46.15% of the field goals that they attempt, which as K-State fans and the K-State fans who are listening to this will know that the last half of the season, we've had some issues with holding the ball and being able to even get kicks into the air, let alone the uprights. So we've had our own issues with that. That stat definitely scares me a little bit.
I don't, and I'll tell you, at home, I've seen guys just miss a bunch of times. We have a loud, rowdy crowd. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Played in some rough weather, but guys have missed. So I don't know. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to it. That's one of those classic, I don't know that past performance dictates what's going to happen. I don't know. But
and if you're saying they're not blocking the field goals, then that's not necessarily.
No, it's not been blocks. They've been missing them. I don't know if now I don't know if that speaks to guys getting in the lane, getting close. And we had, like I said, had blocked the punt. It's not what it was though, where we're just blocking everything. The guys are missing, and I recall distinctly a few. Washington, a couple of them. Illinois, he missed, and that's why we probably should have let him kick at the end of that game where we lost on the touchdown pass. Just to catch up to speed too, if you don't know, Illinois was pushed back on 4th down, like clock winding down to a few seconds left. They trot out their backup kicker because he had once hit a career long of like 56 for a 52-yarder on their heels, wind blowing. I was freezing. It was cold as all hell in there. Terrible wind, just a terrible day. He's lining up to kick. Schiano decides to ice him and call timeout. He misses it. It's not even close. Bielema says, get him out of there. They run a play. Bryant takes the pass all the way to the end zone, and they beat us in the waning seconds. So that's why I keep referencing Illinois. But that would have been another missed field goal to tack onto your stats. So anyway, I digress.
I love it. So, Larry, we're going to throw it to you. We're going to let you ask whatever questions you have for us, and we'll give you our preview since this is our crossover edition of Night Watch and Cocaine Willie here tonight.
So first of all, what I want to ask you is, I mean, I think from, you had Giddens and a really prolific running game this year. And I think Schiano mentioned it in particular. I mean, I think he had 1,300 yards, averaging over 6 a carry. What do you have? 7 touchdowns, like a good line, I think, and a prolific running game there. And obviously that's complementing the passing game. I think 2,500 yards in the passing game for Johnson. You lose, as I understand it, right? You lost some guys to the portal and to the NFL draft. How is that going to impact? I mean, is this a schematic thing where guys are ready to step right into these roles, or is this going to sting K-State a bit going into this bowl game, having a guy enter the NFL draft, and a receiver also entered the transfer portal, if I'm correct, and that was your leading guy. Was it?
Well,
was
there
it
was
Johnson?
a whole
Tell me.
Keegan Johnson left for the transfer portal. He was riddled with injuries throughout his career. This season, he was a little healthier, but he never really was that peak guy. Jace Brown, who we thought we were going to lose to the transfer portal, he's back. He's going to play. But like you said, DJ Giddens being out, that's going to sting a little bit because he was kind of the rock and kind of the motor that got this thing going. Who we're going to have back there, the fans collectively would love to see Joe Jackson back there. Dylan Edwards, maybe get more run and more touches throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
And we did get riddled with some of the transfer portal, some of the younger guys, Trey Spivey, who was an up-and-comer guy that was getting a lot more run in these last few games. And then on the defensive side, Jacob Parrish, he declares for the NFL draft after his junior season, a local kid from Olathe. So that one hurts, and we were already really short at corner with guys that could actually perform. So when you were going through your bevy of talent out wide, 6'6", 6'4", we don't have a lot of guys that can even play corner, let alone deal with somebody that's 6'4" or 6'6". So that one's going to be interesting. We did get – I'll let these guys talk about it too, but we did get a little – this is probably the most we've been hit by the transfer portal, I think, in the Kleiman era.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean one of the other big losses is Carver Willis on the offensive line. That's a guy that he's been on the team for 4 years. He's got a ton of experience. There were games that he was playing as a true freshman up front, so he's a big loss. He's transferring to Washington, so I don't know if Rutgers is playing Washington again next year, but
we are. I think
you'll see him next year. Big guy in purple on the front there, but. I mean, the losses are losses for sure, but we didn't lose our quarterback. We didn't lose, we've still got a lot of the good young talent. And I feel confident that these guys are going to be prepared. They're going to be ready to go. And The only other time Connor Riley has called plays for a bowl game, it seemed to work out well. So I'm hoping if he is the play caller, things will go our direction. But
He did
we'll
have
see.
DJ though, so
He did
we'll
have
see
DJ.
what he does
He did have DJ
at
for
the
sure.
running back position.
Speaking of quarterback, you mentioned quarterback. I mean, really great year. It looks like for Avery Johnson, 22 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 2,500 yards. I think Ethan had a little less than that. I mean, good season from him. Obviously, you had Giddens and you had the running game. How much now shifts to the passing game? And are you guys confident in either A, it's shifting to the passing game and that making up the difference, or B, having another running back that can fill that void? And how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think it was a pretty strong sophomore season for Avery Johnson. You look at the quarterbacks in the same class as him, he's right up at the top, I would say, at least from a statistical perspective. It will be interesting to see in the bowl game, though, especially losing DJ Giddens. You lose a guy like Keegan Johnson, who was starting. I mean, he was playing a significant number of snaps. Who is going to try and make an impression on the outside in the wide receiver position? We do have some younger guys. There's a younger wide receiver who is coming on strong at the end of the season that did put his name in the transfer portal, and Trey Spivey. So I think we're going to end up seeing some freshmen and sophomores out there trying to make an impact in this game. Maybe a guy like Sterling Lockett, if everybody knows the Locketts, there's another Lockett who has gotten a little bit of run as a punt returner, gotten a few snaps at the wide receiver position. Maybe he'll make a little bit of an impact. Dylan Edwards, we mentioned earlier too, he could be a guy that we could end up seeing maybe a little bit more in the slot in this game, where he's very shifty. He's a quick player, has shown effectiveness in the pass game when he's had opportunities. So it's going to be kind of a mix to see, okay, a young guy in Joe Jackson as a running back who a lot of people are very excited about in his limited amount of snaps. I mean, he has played the part in the time that he's been given. And then the fans have been really shouting for Dylan Edwards to get more snaps as well. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a preview into the 2025 season where, what kind of snaps we're going to see from those two. And then Avery has shown the willingness when plays have been called for the deep ball, making big passes. Jace Brown, as Chef mentioned, a guy who's caught some big passes this season, over 50 yards. The play calling has been at some points suspect and has probably been one of the biggest complaints from our fan base on the offensive side, is a little bit of a, I don't know, relaxed. I don't know what's a good word for it, but we haven't seen, I think, as much from the offense that we expected this season. So we're interested to see if they're going to kind of throw everything out there. I mean, in kind of an exhibition game like this.
Yeah, we'll see. To piggyback off of what Matt says, to kind of answer what you were asking, what we're going to see Avery passing the ball a lot, I don't know. Maybe because once he started getting healthier towards the end of the season, because there was a stretch after that Colorado game that he got banged up and he was just not willing to run. How much will he run to, add to that layer of rushing attack that we're losing from DJ Giddens? How much is he going to, shoulder some of that running game in this exhibition bowl game? I don't know, but versus NC State in the last Pop-Tarts Bowl that we played in, that's really where he made his mark, as some of those scrambles out to the right, pump faking and getting into the end zone. So I think losing DJ Giddens to the NFL draft and him not playing in the bowl game, I think maybe we see a healthy Avery Johnson take on, some of the load of running the ball as well.
Makes sense. Now, another thing is you guys 8-4, I believe, overall this season. You're, with the exception of BYU, it seemed like when you were winning, you were prolific offense. I mean, outscoring teams, pretty high scoring affairs. In the losses, it was a little closer and a little more modest. I mean, I wouldn't say totally modest, up scoring in the 20s and whatnot. Would you say you're a team that relies more on that prolific scoring, that high-powered offense, or is there a defensive element or a complementary type situation that works best when you're playing your best ball and you're winning games?
for me, what I think ends up happening is we're really dependent on game script. So we love to run the ball. We're really good at stopping the run on defense. So once we are able to slow the game down where we're forcing the opponent to pass mostly, and then we have we have everything at our disposal to run, pass, RPOs, all of that out onto you. That's when we're really good. But once we get into the situation where it's, we might be down 7 or we're down 10 and the other team is leaning on us, that's when things get real, real bad for K-State. And that's why when you say, like, outside of that BYU game, I mean, Iowa State is a perfect example. We lose that game because we could not get – we were in the game most of the game, but once they started leaning on us and we had to pass, we were in a world of hurt. So for what I see from Rutgers, especially if your running back plays, if we're not able to stop that run and we're forced, down early that we're having to pass and it's kind of scripted and kind of seeing what we're going to have to do, we're going to be in a world of hurt. So I think it all depends on game script. If we get that early lead, we get the ball first, we score, and we get a stop real fast, the game is usually in our favor. And I guess you could say that about mostly any team.
It seems like that from looking at your schedule. I mean, you're either rolling downhill or not. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there was some close games. I think the Colorado game was a interesting one. We dropped the hammer on them with a 50-yard pass at the end of the game. Oklahoma State we rolled, and but we have games exactly like Houston where just bad game script, bad coaching. Really, I guess that's not even a good example, but.
And this team is still top 20 in the nation when you look at EPA per play, offensive efficiency. But then you look at the Iowa State game, and Iowa State's essentially trying to do whatever they can to hand Kansas State the football game. There's multiple turnovers, and there's just no capitalizing on any of those errors or misgivings that Iowa State had. And so I think if we're looking at this matchup, if Rutgers happens to give the ball away for whatever reason, if K-State's not capitalizing on that, it's not going to work out in our favor. Rutgers already does a good job of keeping the ball, not giving it away, and making sure that you pay for it if you do. So well, that's all I have to say about that.
So, and that's all I have to say about that. Is there something schematically that you guys struggle with, or is it just really luck of the draw? Like some games it's just not clicking off turnovers, some games it is, or is there? First of all, if you could tell me a little bit about your offensive scheme and the way you guys play, but then is there a scheme that defensively works to slow you down, or is it just really luck of the draw?
I mean, I'll start with the defensive side. I think if you have a defense that has defensive backs that are aggressive against wide receivers, it's going to be a very tough situation for us. That being said, we're one of the top teams in the nation with regards to using the tight end. We admittingly have I think we've had 4 tight ends that have scored touchdowns this season. We have very athletic tight ends who have the ability to make some really good catches, get some space. And that's been, I would say, one of the strong pieces of the passing offense this season. From a schematic perspective, I think it's tough because we were so strong running the football for a good portion of this season. And we really kind of hit a downhill slog of games where we weren't able to get DJ Giddens any openings to run the football. The offensive line was struggling a bit with that. And then Avery Johnson was not 100% from a health perspective, basically since the Colorado game. So thinking about the beginning of October, his being fully healthy, it was kind of like the Cincinnati game, which is the second to last game of the season. So Avery Johnson was not running the football as much, and just because of that injury. And I think one of the strongest pieces about Avery is he's a true dual threat quarterback, but if he's not running, you're putting the ball in his hands, to try and get his guys to make a play, wide receivers, tight ends, and it just kind of wasn't working out. So this is a team where I've always felt Avery Johnson is the strongest when he runs. He's on the run, making plays with his feet, but then also, getting thrown out of the pocket a little bit. And his decision making has been very strong in finding guys open. So I will be interested to see if the mindset shifts out of this pistol kind of offense that we do typically employ. Are we going to run the football as much in this game, or is Avery Johnson going to run the football a little bit more in this game than what we've seen? If I think that happens, I think it'll be a little bit of a tougher day, respectfully for Rutgers, because I think if Avery's healthy, he's a really, really strong quarterback. And that was kind of holding him back a little bit the back half of the season.
And I think, I'll say this defensively, because things that gave us fit, we run a 3-3-5 schematically, 3 safeties. You brought that up. I mean, we run a 3 safety look as well, 3 high safeties for a lot of the game, which we can switch and disguise it to show maybe a cover 2, but really drop a 3rd safety down in there. And they're true safeties. They're not really. They're actually kind of undersized if you really look at it. Outside of VJ Payne, all our DBs are probably under 6'1", 6 foot at that.
Mm-hmm.
So what really gives us fit, you would think with all those DBs, we would be a lot better against the pass, but teams that were able to spread us out really, really fine with some absolutely stellar wide receivers, we struggled with those kind of teams. But teams that are, in that 12 technique kind of vein, we surge to the ball, and it kind of gives that offensive line, they're kind of seeing ghosts because they don't know exactly where the fits are going to be at, because our linebackers are screaming either off the edge or shooting gaps or something like that. It's like I said earlier, when you said you got receivers that are that big and that athletic and can high point a ball, it's going to really put our DBs to the test. And just not even knowing who's going to be playing that position is going to be a real, it's going to put us to the test, like I said earlier. But
I think, just to point out too, just from a matchup standpoint for our listeners too, like people interested in what this matchup's going to be like, you mentioned the tight end, and I don't know that we've gone up, unlike past years, against any kind of really prolific tight end type game. And the way our linebackers are and our safeties, that's going to be just interesting. I don't know how it'll go, but I think it'll be interesting. And then when you talk about, the way you bring pressure, Athan's been pretty good at handling that pressure and getting guys the ball quickly. So if he makes those right reads, that could be interesting. And also, I mean, we've struggled, it's well documented now, against mobile quarterbacks and dual threat quarterbacks. So if he's on that game like you're talking about, that's really going to be incumbent on Rutgers to figure out how to slow him down on the ground, because that has given us some fits even early in the year, against teams that were from lesser conferences. If they had a mobile quarterback, he was able to get out of the pocket, create things, and then when they start to get on their heels a little bit, complete passes downfield. So Johnson's already a prolific. So, going up against Rutgers, if they struggle, this could really be an interesting matchup. And speaking of matchups and bowl games in general, I mean, what's your guys' general feeling? I mean, I'm kind of the school of, yeah, I understand you expanded the playoff. I understand everything else is kind of relegated to second tier. But my thing's this. It's college ball, man. I like the rivalries in season. I like going to the games. I kind of like bowl games. Like, I just think it's something else you could either put in your trophy case or have a memory or travel to. It's like, I don't know that I need, because I'm also, let's be honest, like, we know who the huge dogs are and who everybody else is. Like, I don't have any illusions about, I don't want to speak on it because Shiana will maybe hunt me down or something. But I don't have any illusions about where they're going. I think this is cool. I like these type of matchups. I think it gives you a chance to play teams at a conference you wouldn't otherwise play. I know we played several years ago in the bowl, but I don't know. I'm a fan of it, and I think it's interesting to get out and do it. But I do understand there's tiers to the bowls too. What's your guys' thoughts, and what's the fan base's thoughts? I mean, you said this is really the first year you've had kind of guys leaving for the portal in these numbers and for the NFL. So clearly the program, especially in previous years, has cared enough to stick it out and play. Our guys have stuck it out and played. What's the feeling of the fan base, the program, you guys, on the whole bowl situation these days?
I think our fans, it depends on the bowl game, right? Because if we were playing in the Liberty Bowl right now, no one would be watching this pod. No one would be listening to either, and we would probably be playing, I don't know, Arkansas or some mid-rate SEC team, which is fine. But we've played in 2 Liberty Bowls in the last 10 years. We got shellacked in both of them, and it's just not a fun experience. Like, Memphis isn't a fun place to go necessarily. Like, going to Arizona, going to Phoenix, that's a lot more fun place to visit in December than Memphis, Tennessee. No offense to anybody who's from Memphis listening or watching this, but it's also fun, to your point, getting to play and getting a matchup against a team you don't often see. K-State or Rutgers get to play each other. On the last week's pod, Chef and I were riffing on this, but like, the Big 12 doesn't play a ton of Big 10 teams. We tend to, when we play out of conference, we typically tend to go SEC or maybe even ACC in the past, and then Pac-12 when that was still a thing. And so, you know, we at some point a couple of years ago did like dream non-conference, out of conference games that you would schedule. Like, Wisconsin would be on that list for me because Camp Randall, I've heard great things about, would love to make a trip up there. So it's cool to be able to have these matchups against Big Ten teams that K-State doesn't really always get to play. It's always fun to be able to have that chip on your shoulder and going up against a Big Ten or an SEC team, now that we've got this, you know, power 2 dynamic now, and being able to come out with a win, it does mean a lot, I think, to our fans as well, but also to fans of the Big 12 coming out of that type of matchup. Makes sense.
I will just say this. The Big 12's bowl kind of hierarchy is getting a little old. My dream would be that these bowl games get to pick one by one, no matter, you don't have a conference affiliation at all. So we have the opportunity to go to some different places. I mean, in the past, we've had the Holiday Bowl. I mean, we've played in the Pinstripe Bowl, which I'm not saying we need to go back to that one, but you know,
it's kind of fun right up the road from me. You know, it's not but that's like you guys talking about Memphis, like I was talking about the Pinstripe. It's fun. It's close. It's Yankee Stadium. I get, but people are sick of it. They're like, I don't want to go to the Pinstripe Bowl. I don't want to go to the Bronx. I don't want to just go across the river. So
you know, to maybe have the opportunity to go to some different bowls outside of, you know, outside of Phoenix or Memphis. I mean, there's a bunch in Texas. So hopefully, you know, in the near future, they're able to kind of get that situated where, you know, the Big 12 would be in maybe the Vegas Bowl or getting the Holiday Bowl back. Some of these ones that I think fans would be more apt to making the trip. But the other tough part is, especially with a game on December 26th, you know, it's primarily a TV audience is going to be watching this game. And, you know, a lot of families aren't able to, you know, head right to Phoenix for Christmas, you know, right after Christmas. And so I think from both fan bases, you're going to have some diehard fans that are there, but it's going to be a TV audience at 5 p.m. on an Eastern time, I think. So, you know, that there's definitely worse bowl places to have teams go to for sure.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a traditionalist, so I like all bowls. You know, the whole holding out and saying that you're not going to play and all that stuff. I mean, last year we had basically should have been a first rounder in Cooper Beebe playing the Pop-Tart Bowl because he loves Kansas State that much. Those are the kind of things that you like to see. And I'm not going to knock a player, especially at running back. You know, don't need to take those extra hits on your body, especially if you're going to be trying to warm up to test well at the combine or wherever you're going to be, you know, trying to get to the NFL. So I'm not going to knock anybody like that, but it just stinks in this era of football where we're trying to get the rosters down to 105 and all these things. It's just bad. The sport that we grew up and, you know, we loved, it's not the same anymore. And, you know, people, you know, getting into the transfer portal, like the Penn State guy, the guy from Penn State. I mean, he's the backup quarterback for a team that's going into the college football playoff and he's dipping out. Are you serious? Like, what are we doing here? You can win a national title, but you're going to go into the transfer portal so you could be the starting quarterback at Boston College. I mean, what are we doing here? This is so bad. Like, but that's the only thing. Like, but as a fan, all these bowls are exciting. For me, I just like watching a whole bunch of football and a whole bunch of different matchups that we never get to see. Like we're going to see, who is it? East Carolina, NC State. Like that is classic right there. That is just, there's going to be some hate. There's going to be some vitriol in that, in two teams that never get to play each other like that. So it's going to be fun just to watch those, just all football, all types of football.
I agree with that. And I agree with you on pretty much everything you said. It's definitely a different sport than we grew up on. And, the checking out and not, it's a new world for sure. And you lose a lot of the regional rivalries you used to have too, and in the conference realignment. And look, I'm still a fan and I love it and eat it up, but it's kind of definitely a brave new world. But I think a lot of Rutgers fans, they'll sit there and there's some banter like, well, who cares about this? And they're excited about the bowl. This is a good matchup. They're excited about the bowl. And bowl games are fun. And if you're a fan of a team, you got to be excited about these types of things. I'm driving to Maine the day after Christmas for a little week excursion. So I'm trying to get there in time to like set up shop at like a craft brewery or something and watch the game. But it's fun. Like I'm happy I get to watch it on TV the day after Christmas and just chill. So I'm excited about it. Guys, last question is just, if there's one factor, whether it's Rutgers not doing something or K-State doing something that you think is going to decide this game one way or the other, or two keys, I'm interested in the K-State perspective on that. So let me know what you think of what wins the game for either team.
I mean, I think for K-State, the key is offensive efficiency. Just being smart on offense. I feel like that has been a little bit of a struggle towards the end of the season. So how can you scheme to get 5 yards of carry? How can you scheme to help get Avery some easier shots downfield? I think the play calling, K-State fans are going to really use this game as a barometer to how excited we're going to be about our offensive coordinator coming back next year. If this is a team that scores 28, 31 points, something like that, we win, we'll feel a lot better than a team that continually is struggling on the offensive side in this game, even with a month that we've been scheming against Rutgers. So I think the biggest key is going to be just how efficient K-State can be on offense and getting playmakers opportunities with the ball so that we can, make this a game.
I think the key for me is just from the Kansas State perspective is how we hold up on the defensive end. I think we're gonna flex our muscle in terms, especially if your running back doesn't play. I think we'll flex our muscle in terms of trying to slow down that running game, but with the lack of experience and the lack of depth in the DB position, I'm going to be looking and I'm going to have a magnifying glass on top of what we're doing on the back end. If we're giving up explosives or just consistently giving up catches for first downs, that is going to really, put a thorn in my side of how we're running our defense and what playmakers are we going to be able to get going into maybe 2025 to help that, because what we have on the roster, if that doesn't show any light and we don't hit in the transfer portal, I'm really, really going to be nervous for 2025. But this game, man, Rutgers, if they take advantage of their size on the outside, I'm nervous. I've been biting my nails all episode because I'm just so.
Could be a shootout, man. I don't know. It seems like your offense is good and ours has been pretty good. The defenses, it seems like maybe the question mark.
I think for me, the key on the defense is going to be obviously trying to make Rutgers one-dimensional and trying to force Calic Manis to throw the ball and leverage his playmakers outside with wide receivers, knowing that Kyle Monangai, he may not be playing. He may not be in this game. And you may have some running back depth who's good, but maybe doesn't have as many in-game reps and a ton of experience playing at the highest level as a guy like Monangai has. And then I think honestly on the offense I'm going to be looking at our offensive line because Rutgers can really get after the quarterback on defense. And if we if our offensive line, you're losing out on Carver Willis, you're going to have some guys maybe rotating in some newer, fresher faces that haven't seen as much playing time. It's going to be interesting to see how our offensive line holds up against a pretty stout Rutgers defensive attack when it comes to their ability to get after the quarterback. So I think if our offensive line can hold sturdy, that's great. Even if they don't, I want to see Avery scrambling and making some plays and getting out there. So I'm looking forward to it either way. But should we go into score predictions there, Chef?
Yeah, let's do some score predictions. I think the line is 40. The over/under is 49.5. We're favored. I think it was at 7.5 for a while, but I think it's down to 7. I've got the score 27-20 K-State. I think it's going to be tight, and I think we get a late score to end the game to go up 7 and win the game. 27-20 K-State.
Larry, what's your prediction? And then also I want to hear your key to victory as well, because I realize we skipped over you.
I got a rep for the guys here for Rutgers and go
heck yeah.
They're 35-32, and I know it's a high score and it's way above the over there. I mean, but I just know our defense, and your guys' offense seems prolific to me, even with some of the guys leaving. And with a quarterback that's that effective, I think it's going to be, the impetus is going to be on our offense to keep pace. And I am, the first time in years, I'm confident in this offense and this quarterback to kind of go tit for tat with another prolific offense. And I don't know, based on what you're telling me about some of the defensive issues versus our offensive attributes, and then vice versa, what you're telling me about your offense, I like this game as a higher scoring game, going to be out there in Arizona. And maybe that's completely not the case because they haven't met each other and all of a sudden the defense is something they can't figure out. But I like this as an offensive back and forth, a real fun game. I know we're the underdogs, but I'll go with my guys and say they'll pull out a nail biter at the end there, whether that's by a field goal or whether that's a late touchdown after kicking a couple and scoring a couple and coming away with it. Keys to victory, I mean, it's going to be, I think, hands down here is, can Rutgers establish who they want to be on offense, i.e. get the running game going to an extent, whether it's Kyle Monungai or the other guys, and can Ethan Kaliakmanis bring his A game as he has done the last month, get the ball to these playmaking receivers, Dymere Miller, Ian Strong on the outside, KJ Duff, and can this offensive line hold its own? But then on defense, I think that the critical piece to this game for Rutgers, I really think, is defensively. Can you at least slow down that quarterback who's a dual threat, running the ball and passing the ball? You have running backs who you guys are excited to see. You don't run for that many yards and you're not that prolific without a good offensive line. So I'm not counting the running game out, but in a game where Giddens is not going to play and you have a good quarterback, but can you force K-State to put everything on his shoulders? And not that that's a bad thing for him, but once on his shoulders, can you keep him contained as best you can, specifically on the ground, so that he's not so unpredictable? If Rutgers can play respectably on defense, limit what K-State's options are, I think they have a better shot. If it gets away from Rutgers defense, where he's able to just do anything and everything starts going downhill for K-State, I think it's going to be a real problem for Rutgers. So I think, as much as I like the shootout, Rutgers defense has to show some semblance of an ability to get some stops, and I'm curious to see how that goes.
I'm actually also kind of trending towards a high scoring game here. I think it's going to be kind of throwing everything from an offensive perspective out there for both teams. I'm going to say 41-35 K-State.
Holy shit!
I know. I'm putting a lot of I'm putting a lot of faith right now. I'm not putting any money on it, but anyway, reason being, I think K-State, on the offensive side, offensive coordinator Connor Riley, he's heard a lot of the critics, especially in the past month. And I think he knows this is a good opportunity to really kind of put a plan in place, throw something out there, maybe a little bit different than what we've seen the past 4 games. of the regular season and just kind of let Avery Johnson shine a little bit. I also think K-State's defense is going to miss Jacob Parrish so much in this game that it's going to be I believe Rutgers is going to be passing the ball around. And it's going to be key for K-State's defense to try and get some pressure to the quarterback. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. This would be a 41-35 game would be a very exciting game, I think, for a lot of people to watch. So I hope for an exciting game.
I agree. Well, Larry, that's going to do it for us today. Let the Cokeheads know, our loyal listeners and viewers, where they can find you, and we'll get out of here.
Sure. Night Watch with Larry K. Just type it in, Night Watch, but you got to put the Larry K at the end, because if you just type Night Watch into Google, you're going to get a whole lot of medieval role-playing stuff. Very odd. Night Watch Larry K on YouTube. Come visit me. Click subscribe. I'm part of the College Huddle Network. Shouts to those guys putting all this together. It's been an awesome year as part of the College Huddle. So go over there, subscribe to my YouTube, and then every major podcast platform, same thing. You don't want to fall into some medieval thing like Role Models, that movie, funny movie. Larry K. Night Watch. Type it in. Any major podcasting platform, come join me. And guys, obviously it shows your cast and everything, but let everybody on Night Watch know where they could find you, since we're simulcasting. Is it just YouTube? Is it beyond? And guys, go over there and subscribe to them as well.
Yeah, we are on all social media at Cocaine Willie on YouTube, TikTok, Blue Sky, Twitter, or Instagram. And then you can follow us individually. I'm at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini. Also, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Animaze Parlor. Visit them at www.animaze.com for a full list of their upcoming events. And if there are any Rutgers fans that are happen to be passing through flyover territory, or the 5 Rutgers fans that somehow live in Kansas by some act of God, if you're ever in the Little Apple, not the Big Apple, stop by Animaze and we'll get you taken care of.
Sounds awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Absolute pleasure.
Chef, let's get out of here. Wildcat Country.
It's a hell of a drug, baby.
We're all coke and no joke. Wildcat Country.
Let's ride.
Let's ride.
Let's ride.